Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us again for our third webinar in our series of Déise OG webinars. We're delighted that tonight we're going to, change the focus a little bit from what we had in the previous one. So we're going to move on to the youth coach and working at developing the player through the teenage years, those difficult teenage years. And we're delighted tonight to be joined by Peter Nash from Limerick. So Peter is a GDA who all of us in Déise OG and Waterford, our GDAs, would know well. Peter is the Hurling Development Officer in Limerick City and has been working as a GDA with the Limerick County Board for quite a number of years. He's also a member of the Limerick Senior Football Panel and has been for a good number of years, and obviously has a good bit of experience in the dealing with these players in the teenage years through his work, daily work, and his work with some of the underage development squads. And will give some of his own insights from his own time working his way up and his background and how he came about to develop himself through that time to become a Limerick senior footballer for 7 or 8 years. So we're delighted that Peter has joined us. We do have the Q&A piece open here for anybody who wants to put in questions, and we have some questions in already from people who registered, and thanks for those. We had about 140 people registered for tonight. So Peter is going to touch on some of them in his presentation, and we have a couple more for afterwards. And if anybody else would like to ask questions, please feel free to put it into the Q&A, and we'll get through as many of them as we possibly can after the presentation. So Peter, if you're ready, I'm going to hand over. You can give yourself a bit more of an introduction and you can rock on from there. So off you go.
Yeah, I'm good to go. So I assume I'll be told if I can't be heard or my presentation can't be seen, so I'm just going to hammer on the basis that's going to be the case. So first of all, I just like to say welcome. I'd like to thank Owen and Barry for the opportunity to present for you. I'm always surprised that, first of all, I'm after getting 2 surprises. The first surprise was to be asked to present at all. And the second surprise is that people have actually turned up to listen to me, so I'm actually delighted with that. So I just following on from Owen's introduction, I just give a little bit of a background on myself, and I'll keep that as short as I possibly can, because always talking about yourself is an awkward conversation. But I started out, I was a late comer to GAA myself. I was always a kind of a soccer player underage, and always saw myself as a soccer player underage, and I didn't really start playing properly for a club until I was 16, touching 17. And then it just kind of took off from there for me. The love of the GAA, really, I was taken in, I was made part of the community, and I was shown what it meant to really be part of something and really identify with something. I went on to study health and leisure in Tralee, specialising in adaptive physical activity. And then from there, I went straight into a job with Limerick GAA, working as the Hurling Development Officer for Limerick City. I've been playing football with Limerick for just stepping into my 9th year now, and my club, my own home club, would be Kildima Palace Kenry. You might know him. Kyle Hayes would be a club mate of mine, and we'd be a dual club. We're just after making the step up to the senior hurling ranks in Limerick for the first time in over 80 years, and my football side of the club then would be intermediate football, and we were intermediate for the first time in our history there 2 years ago as well. So things are on the up for the club, and hopefully they'll keep going that way. So basically, I work as a hurling development officer for Limerick City, the same as any of your GDAs would work, and the people you know within your county, Barry or any of the lads. And the one thing about working as a GDA is you get to see all facets of the GAA. You get to work with kids from the ages of 4 all the way up to adults, the age of 18, 19, 20, at different stages, and you get to see the pathway subjectively. You get to take a step back and you get to see, okay, this is where they start, this is how they progress, and this is where they go. And that's what I love about it. I love the journey side of it, to be honest with you. I love the fact that I may see some young player at 13 years of age, and we have the Mackie Cup competition in Limerick, which is the primary schools cup competition, and I spend 4 to 5 months coaching them, building up towards this competition, and then I pass them on and they go on and they begin secondary school, and I don't see them again for maybe 2 to 3 more years in some cases. And all of a sudden, this person I knew as a child has become a young adult and they're a completely different person, but there's still that connection in the sense that we worked on this, work towards this project, work towards this competition together 2 to 3 years previous. And that's what I love about it. Like my friends would often say as well, like, you'd be walking through the Crescent shopping centre in Limerick and I'd have kids saluting me based on the fact that I'm in all their primary schools, and my friends just find it the strangest thing of all time that they have kids saluting me and parents coming up to say hello and I'm saluting them back, and my friends just can't get over it. But it's part of the job I love. It's that connection. It's that kind of shared interest. That fact that they know that I'm there for their best interests, and that they're able to identify with me then afterwards. And I think that's what the GAA is all about, that connection. And that's why I love what I do. So I said I'd keep the introduction short. I haven't probably managed to do that, and I might manage to keep anything short for the next little while, but we're going to get started and we're going to push on. And the first slide I have up here is a little 3-minute task, and I'm going to set 3 minutes on the clock here, and just as quick as you can. And this is just for yourself now. This doesn't have to go into the chat. You can write this down on a piece of paper yourself, and it's just to frame what we're going to do going forward. It's just 4 little things that I'd like you to write down in the next 3 minutes. The first one would be, write down one thing your players do well. So what I'm assuming here is, I'm assuming that every coach logged onto this group has worked with a group in the last couple of years or is currently working with a group at the moment. And what I'd like you to do is, I'd just like you to write down one thing your players do well, one thing that you are proud of, something you have coached them or something they have brought to the pitch themselves that you think they do well, they do that well, and they naturally fall into this kind of level of performance in that particular area. I want you to write down one thing that you like about your group, and this is away from playing. This is hedging towards that shared moment that you have with your group, that sense of identity, the fact that you are a group of people working towards a goal or working your way along a kind of a pathway on a journey. I want you to write down one positive memory. So this can be from any time. This can be returning from the pandemic first session back, the fun, the energy. This can be something you took them on a trip. You have this group for the last 5 or 6 years. You took them on a trip to Croke Park 2 or 3 years ago for a match, and just the general fun and the general energy around the place was amazing. Anything along that. And then what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to write down one hope for the future for all your players. So if you wanted to break it down into groups, you have a hope for some of your group to go on to something, the rest of your group to do this, and your third group to go on to do something else. Or you would just love to see all your players take at least this one thing from their time working with you as a coach that's going to positively impact their life going forward. So I'm going to set 3 minutes on the clock. I'm going to give you that silence and that time to take stock and write these things down. And then we're just going to leave that sit, and we'll move on to really kicking off the presentation. Okay, so we're a minute down and we have 2 minutes left. There may be some people starting to wrap up. If there's certain things that you'd like to add to what you've already written down, now you have the time to do it. And if you're only at question 1, we can keep pushing on, and you still have a little bit of time to get through all the rest of your questions. So just a minute left on the clock. Okay, so I hope you've taken something. That's our 3-minute timer done. I hope you've taken something from that we can carry forward and may potentially align with the kind of central theme or the number of central themes that we're looking to really hammer home over the course of this presentation. So moving on to our next slide, the first thing I want to approach is the fact that the kind of shared ownership of the player's journey and looking to build relationships. It's incredibly important that we as coaches understand that there are 3 kind of key stakeholders here, and potentially we all want different things. But if we all want the same thing and there's a shared understanding of where we'd like to go, the connection and the relationship can be incredibly powerful and lead to creation of an environment where the player itself can really take ownership, like we said, of their own destiny and have that support structure around them that again wants the best for them as an individual, as a human being. So we look at the player, and again the player is in ownership of their own destiny. And this basically means that at any point in time they can decide that I'm going to batten down the hatches here and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to pump time into this and I'm going to see progress. And they will see progress depending on how hard they're willing to work and how much they're willing to go up. At any level they're playing at. Now, we as coaches then, we're in ownership of the pathway for them. We create the environment that they come into every week for their sessions, or twice a week in some cases. We set up the opportunities for learning. We create games opportunities for them. We set up their sessions, and the content that's covered over time within that session. So we're really in ownership of the path they go down if they want to come the GAA route with us. And the parent then is in ownership of their environment to a certain extent. So it's incredibly important to understand that if we're to be successful, the parent has a huge role in this. And if the parent understands then that we want the best for their young person as a human being first before a player, there'll be an incredible buy-in, and there's the power there to have something that means an awful lot more than it just being kind of a relationship in a playing capacity, or we're looking to get the most out of them for the sake of ourselves or our setup or our team or our club. If we put the player at the center of everything, the parent certainly come on board. And if the player feels wanted, feels like they're cared about on a human level, they will most certainly come on board as well. And then ultimately then, from a coaching point of view, it will make our job an awful lot easier once we have that buy-in. So if we look at what the player wants fun, enjoyment, engagement, chances to learn and chances to grow and improve. And they want that social outlet. The coach themselves, every single coach is in it for a different reason. Now, there are a lot of these reasons that align, but if we were to concoct 3 reasons why we are all in this, we would come up with 3 different things. One of them might be the same as the person beside us, but the other 2 would be different. But ultimately, the coach wants the best for the team in front of them, the season that they're looking at, and the club as a whole. The parent, if we were to ask any parent, if we were to survey, parents would say, what would you like? If you were to ask a parent, what would they like their son or daughter to take from their participation in sport? It would even push towards more along the likes of life skills. So the parent obviously wants their child to enjoy exactly what they're doing, to be able to understand the importance of giving time to something and seeing results. And then on top of that, they would love to see opportunities for growth in the likes of leadership, accountability, ownership, taking responsibility, building of confidence, and again, that outlet. It's that outlet is incredibly important for any human being, that means of expression. And I think parents would see the difference in their child between them not having that outlet and then have all of a sudden having that outlet and a positive environment, a positive environment in which to pump their energy into. So the key emphasis from this point is the fact that we're looking to build relationships on all fronts. And the only way to build relationships is to be honest and open lines of communication and facilitate. We facilitate the player, we facilitate the parent will come on board, and us as a coach, there we have our buy-in. And our buy-in is ultimately what we need. So if we're looking at ownership and opportunities, as coaches, we take ownership of the fact that we have opportunities to provide games. And that's provide games for everyone, regardless of how we feel they perform at a certain level in certain situations. The only way that we can help them improve is by providing opportunities for improvement. And if we want them to improve their performance within a game setting, the only way for that to happen is for them to experience these games. We create the right environment. And I can't exactly tell you about your identity. I can't tell you about Waterford GAA's identity. I can only speak from my own experience. But I feel that creating a successful environments and the right environment for growth and improvement, a lot of the key factors and facets of that will remain the same. And they relay back to exactly what the parent would like to see their child take from sport. Leadership, ownership, accountability, responsibility, all of these key personality traits that are going to lead us towards real deep engagement, and that feeling that if a player, let's say, was to walk away or to lose it, that it would be a loss to their quality of life. We as coaches, it's our opportunity. We take ownership of it, and we have the opportunity to lay the path and help them walk it. So if we only look at what's in front of us 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're constantly reacting. And if we're constantly reacting and we're potentially in that kind of fight or flight state all the time, are we ever going to really learn? Would be the question I would pose. And if as coaches we're not learning, are our players learning? So if we're to take a step back and think, okay, I get this player stepping out of GAA games at 12, stepping into under 13 and 14, 15, 16 and 17. Where would I like them to be in 3 or 4 years' time? And then after that, where would I like them to be in another 3 or 4 years' time? And what's the best way for us to get there? So if we look long term, we have an opportunity to lay the path that they are eventually going to walk. When we move on to parents, we look at, they facilitate their person's participation in sport. If they take ownership of that, that's their opportunity to help their child engage, keep them healthy, keep them active. They also take ownership of helping the player to lead a healthy lifestyle. So oftentimes in households, parents are in control of the home diet, attitude towards levels of activity, and just general kind of demeanor around the house and values and principles that that person that they're raising is going to carry into the real world. So if they help and understand their role in helping a player lead a healthy lifestyle, that's going to complement not only their playing performance but their life going forward, we will have a huge opportunity for really, really well-rounded human beings and players then. And most importantly, in my eyes, to be honest with you, from a parent's point of view, it's an opportunity for you to be their escape when they need it. And this for me is from the self-imposed pressure of sport. Because personally as a player, I've never experienced external pressure that's been greater than the pressure I have put on myself for performance at any level or capacity. that can be me overstating my own ability as a player, but I will always know myself, and this is something that we repeat all the time. This is something you will hear in every coaching course. I will always know myself when I have made a mistake. I will always know myself, even though it may not always present itself to an external body, to a coach or to a supporter or to a parent. I will always know myself when I haven't played to the level of my capabilities. Now, whether I'm overstating my own capabilities, I let everybody else be the judge of that. But I often find, and I have found an awful lot, that being able to just come home and decompress, being able to come in the door, leave the gear bag down, and to be distracted when I needed it, but then to have the opportunity to broach the subject when I was comfortable with it, has allowed me to decompress to a certain extent a lot of the time. So as a parent, as a player, as a coach, we need to understand that the player we're getting, they're not always going to, no matter how well we lay out the pathway, or no matter how well we facilitate their participation in sport, the ups and downs of it, they're not always going to be in love with it. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. It's a journey. We have to take the wins when we get them, and we have to reframe the losses when they happen. So allowing your young person the opportunity to just come home and decompress is such a huge thing in creating long-term engagement in our sport. And the reason I haven't put players into this ownership and responsibilities and ownership and opportunities slide is because as players, they have enough to focus on in continuing themselves, improving, pumping their time into just managing, having fun and enjoying the game, while constantly trying to learn and improve. So if we're moving on to our next slide, we're going to broach the subject of skill development. So the fact that we are coaching the youth athlete and developing the youth athlete, skill development becomes an incredibly broad spectrum. So they step out of go game situations where they have modified games, small goals, small playing areas, into all of a sudden having a heavier slitter, a larger playing area, and more numbers. And then every single year they step forward in the path. The players are becoming taller and stronger. They may be waiting on a growth spurt. I'm still waiting on my growth spurt. I think Warren Burnock will vouch for that. And all of a sudden, things change. Every single year, they're facing different stimulus. They're facing different challenges. And we have a huge role in skill development. And like I said, the landscape of skill development changes as we move. But the key parts are as follows. If we look at an individualized approach to every individual's skill development, as opposed to numbers in drills and bodies on pitches, we have a better chance of allowing them to improve. So in order to do that, we need a great deep understanding of the skill. And the only way we can really create that deep understanding of the skill is through a conscious coaching. Looking at what the top players are doing, applying that to the very, very start of the pathway at 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s and 10s, and the core structure and setup of each individual skill. And then as time goes on, we see that there are a lot of things that kind of, they cross tab, they cross over on top of each other. And we can see that we laid a basis around movement and understanding how a person moves in order to build a kind of a skill base on top of that. So the reason I have beside this and a pyramid setup and movement at the base of the pyramid is because the wider the movement base we have, the more potential we have to build sport-specific skills on top of that. And on top of that, the wider and more solid our movement base, the more solid our skill base is going to be. And if we can combine these two, we have at the very, very peak of the pyramid here, our game. And we're always working towards a summit, and the summit being performance within game scenarios. But below that then, on the contrary, I have an exact same pyramid, with games at the centre of everything we do, and the base and the solid and the structure and the support we have. And the reason behind this is because, like I said, somewhere along the pathway, and this is individual to every player you have, so that's why I'm trying to generalize it as much as I possibly can. The focus must shift. That we have laid the movement base. We have created, as our strength conditioning coach Andrew O'Brien would say, motor geniuses as opposed to motor morons. And they have a skill base on top of that that's going to allow them to perform in the game. But then we flip it up, we flip it over, and the only way to improve that skill and lead to further levels of performance within game scenarios is for the game itself to apply the pressure. So there we see the landscape of skill development changing, and it's individual for absolutely everybody. But we see constant themes arising within certain stages of development, certain age groups. So that's why it's so important to apply the right pressure at the right time. And the reason I have a number of different options here as regards time, instruction, passive pressure, personnel, and scenarios is because time is a key element for skill development at, let's say, 10s, 11s, and 12s. A lot of the time there, we'll focus in on putting time pressure on a skill. How many can you perform in 30 seconds of a roll lift, a jab lift, striking left or right off a wall, and then we'll instruct. And if we're not careful with our instruction, our language around our instruction, and being clear on exactly what we need our player to do, that becomes a pressure. So if we get a clear language in place of exactly how we'd like our players to perform a skill, so that they can relay it back to being able to understand the task, identify the pressure, and provide themselves a solution, then we have an opportunity to really create incredibly coachable players, which is what we want as coaches. That's our time pressure. Moving on to when the time is right, adding in passive pressure. And passive pressure, the level of passive pressure is dictated by, to a certain extent, the level of physicality at any given age. And that passive pressure will increase as players get older, and it can also decrease in the sense that they understand what passive pressure will be more. But once we introduce passive pressure will always be what they're physically capable of giving at that time. So that's why we as coaches need to be in control of it. Set scenarios where if I had a player that was far bigger than a player I put them with. Now we talk about trying to keep players grouped, or to a certain extent we match the players of similar size with each other all the way down along, so that they can understand what passive pressure is, they get to work within their own, and they get to experience a positive outcome. But the opportunity to flip that on its head once we get to a certain level can be an excellent leveler, because always, and it's a point I make at the end, technique is the great leveler when it comes to a size differential. So what I mean by that is, when we instruct, when we have time pressure and we've moved on to, we've mastered time and instruction and we've moved on to passive pressure, if we were to set a scenario one-on-one with one of our perceived larger players for a certain age group with one of our smaller players, and we give them a wide open space, no space limitations whatsoever, so to a certain extent that takes out some form of physicality from the larger player, and we encourage our, let's say if we're talking about any form of dispossession, if it was football we're talking about a near hand tackle, our player that's looking to dispossess, my key focus and instruction would be, I don't want you to engage in any form of the physical side of trying to wrestle with the player that you are looking to dispossess. There's a wide open space. We are playing within the rules, so they only have 4 steps before they can take a play. And what I'd like you to work on is timing and precision. So if you get an opportunity to make a decision based on a solo going astray, or if we're hurling, them showing you their hurley side and allowing you to dispossess, I would like you to be as precise as you possibly can in your approach and take the dispossession. So we're leveling the playing field there a little bit, in the sense of we're taking the opportunity for physicality to be the deciding factor out of it, and we're focusing both players, not just the player that's looking to dispossess, but also the player that they're looking to dispossess. We're focusing them in on their technical performance of the skill. So passive pressure and understanding around it can be an incredible tool for us in relation to skill development. Personnel. Moving on to game scenarios, personnel has a huge bearing on our performance of the skill. So when I'm looking to really introduce a skill with a young group, what I'll do is I'll give them small numbers in a huge playing area. And I really, really mean that. A playing area that's far greater than the playing area that they'll probably play a game in, and they'll have less numbers within that. So what I'm doing there is I'm giving them the opportunity to take that second to make a decision based on, if I'm trying to coach them a skill in a drill scenario or a one-to-one basis, if I don't give them the opportunity to make that decision or take the time over the decision that they got when I was coaching them, with slightly more pressure than would be in the drill scenario, I'm not giving them the leeway to grow. So adding personnel into an area and then creating scenarios. From there, once we have a certain level of skill that we understand that we must flip down to the bottom pyramid here and put the game at the center of everything, it's about creating scenarios that players are going to face in games. And the understanding that if I'm starting talking about developing a strike within an individual, right or left, the grip and the swing is the key at young ages. And the elbow is the key to the grip and swing in my ground strike or striking out of the hand at 5, 6, 7, and 8. But moving on, I understand then that if they're taking the time to get their elbow up every single time they strike in tight areas with lots of bodies, the chances of them being hooked are far greater. So the more I try and force the elbow up in order to develop the grip and swing, to lay the basis and the foundation for skill development, as the game goes on and as the years progress, we're looking to tighten up and tidy up those elbows as much as we can, so that the greater, let's say, deciding factor in the level of performance of the skill are the action of the wrist. So high elbow allows me to use my wrist at the end in order for my wrist to be the most for want of a better word, deciding factor in how the skill is performed. So moving on to the next situation then, or the next point we talk about, we coach in and out of habits in order to, once we really understand the skill, and I spoke about it as regards high elbow in ground strike or striking out of the hand, we coach them into that habit, understanding that once we're looking at things long term, that we're going to coach them out of that habit later on by providing stimulus within a game scenario that's going to make sure that they have to tidy up these elbows and use their wrists more. And at the last point in relation to skill development, we must allow for individual style and expression at all times. So the key basis of skill performance is going to remain the same. If I was to pick any skill as regards hook kick and football, same hand, same leg, hit over the ball, step in and strike through with the inside of your foot, it may look different across your panel from player 1 to player 10 or to 15 to 20 to 30. It may look different, but once they're performing the key components of the skill, same hand, same leg, hit over the ball, using the instep and striking through the ball every single time, the base is laid. And we must allow then for individual style to really allow it to grow and take hold of the player and see where we can go from there. So moving on to skill development, we have the basis laid, we've created a movement base that we've built a skill set on top of in order to create opportunities for games-based coaching and building a playing IQ. And this is an incredibly important, once we have the technical mastered, and we have an incredible amount of work put into the technical side of the game up to under 14, we must shift the focus towards the tactical and the performance and understanding game scenarios. Now, I've been asked questions along the lines of what would be the right time to add the tactical side of the game into it, understanding sweepers and all of these things, my answer to that question, for it not to be too short an answer, would be opportunities will arise for these coaching situations the more opportunities we give players to play the game. And are we looking to implement tactics for the long-term development of the player, or to win the game that's in front of us? And what are our priorities with the young person and the individual we have in front of us? They would be the questions I would ask in response to the question, when would be the right time to introduce tactics? For me, I would deem it more important to introduce concepts to the game. Make players competent on a one-to-one basis, both attacking and defending. So you here, no matter what happens between the ages of 12, 13 and 18 and 19, you are going to pass a player that you have developed into the adult side of the game. And are they going to have the coping mechanisms to be able to respond to situations they're going to be put in by adult coaches at adult level with a little bit less of a safety net as they progress through their career all the way through? So when we look at games-based coaching, it's all about building a playing IQ, creating an understanding around certain concepts of the game and looking to improve players' understanding of these concepts. So the same way coaching is not about drills, games-based coaching is not all about games. And it's not about setting up the fanciest game you possibly can, or a game you saw someplace that you thought, that's a great game, I'm going to play that in my next training session, without any real thought behind why that game is being played or what outcomes it's looking to draw from the players. Having the knowledge is important, and this is true about coaching and what we're looking to instill in our players. Having the knowledge is important, but we can only truly implement something when we can both understand it and we can communicate it. So I can't implement any aspect of the game if I can't understand it basically myself and then be able to communicate and get my point across. And the same can be said for our players. If I'm looking for them to implement some form of concept of the game in a training setup or in a match, if they don't understand it, it won't happen. If they can't communicate it to a teammate, or they can't communicate with me as a coach, it's going to break down. And communication being the key aspect, what I'm trying to say to the player might not always be what they pick up. So we need to understand that we need to be patient with it. It's going to take time, it's going to take constant coaching, re-coaching, and it's also going to take that little half a step back so that they come to meet you and take the concept that you're looking to get across to them and run with it. 3 key concepts of looking at games-based coaching are as follows, and it's conscious coaching. It's the fact that when I come to the pitch, I'm conscious of how my players have reacted to certain situations before. I'm conscious of where they're going long term. I'm conscious of being well prepared for the session that I am facing into at the moment, not just from a setup of activities and games, but also in my line of questioning. And this is where games-based coaching is misunderstood. Your games-based approach is all about the line of questioning and the learning outcomes. And if there are no principles, there's no purpose. So if I'm looking, an example I would always use would be, instead of looking at going to a match and realizing that, okay, we gave away 15 frees in the first half of that game and ultimately we lost it by 2 points. I need to work on their tackling. I need to work on their approach to the ruck. I need to work on their reading of a breaking ball. I need to work on how they use, manipulate and shape their body in certain scenarios in relation to both rucking and the tackle. There we have a principle. And there we have something to build on. And instead of reacting to that happening in the game and then the next training session being all about exactly that, we move on to the next game, something else breaks down and we move on to that. I would say take a step back and think, right, when I lay out my year at the very, very start, my first 6 weeks is going to be about creating scoring opportunities. And if the defensive side of the game breaks down to a certain extent over that course of time, that's okay. And I'm going to communicate that to my players because that's a scenario that I'm looking to create. And at the end of this 6 weeks, we'll have learning outcomes along the line of players will understand the concepts of width, they'll understand the concepts of depth, they'll understand areas of the pitch we'd like to create scoring opportunities in, and they'd understand certain areas of the pitch where we're looking to create point scoring opportunities and other areas where we're looking to create goal scoring opportunities. And then at the end of that 6 weeks, I shift my focus and we're moving in towards the defensive side of the game. I guarantee you that at the end of that 12-week block, players will have a greater grasp of concepts and principles within the game than they would be if we played 12 games across that time and it was all about reacting to what happened in the game went before. And you as a coach take the pressure off yourself. Our results then are not about the scoreboard. Our results are based around the learning outcomes, and we have better players that are able to communicate and understand concepts of the game at the end of that 12 weeks. So the importance of principles in relation to purpose can't be overstated enough on my point. And like I said, just to follow my point, we all learn together then. I learn as a coach the best way to communicate my points to the players I have in front of me, and that may change depending on any group we have. We're going to be made up of different individuals, and I learn different ways to communicate and coach them, and our players learn parts of the game that they're going to carry with them all the way through to their adult level and the best chance they possibly have of continued participation in their sport, because they take a confidence out of it's not just about the highs and lows week by week of winning and losing. It's about understanding that losses happen. We take the wins when they come, but we learn more from losing. So from here, looking at that in action, games-based approach is a constraints-led approach. And we control those constraints, we control the tasks, we control all these things based on design and manipulation of games. And it's key for me to make sure that they are putting in the constraints. They're for a reason, and they're to create a stimulus that's going to challenge our players. And if our players figure this out early, come up with a solution, and it's a positive result, comes from that, we absolutely commend that. Because the quicker players are thinking, the more responsive, or the more foresight they have in a situation that allows them to make better decisions, is exactly the outcome we're looking to get here. So the point in black on the other side of the page would be then, don't over constrain, to the sense that we have something planned out within a session and all of a sudden this game was supposed to last us 16 minutes and they have it solved in 7. We shift the focus then, and instead of adding in another constraint, or instead of trying to set them up to fail so that we get what we need to get, or more time in relation to time, get what we need to get in relation to time out of the task, we turn that situation into practice. They have the solution based on the task that was posed to them. Now what we do is we shift the focus, and what I'd like you to do is we replay this over and over again so it becomes a pattern of play, and it allows me to really consolidate and really drive home the point of the players. So moving on to design and manipulation of games, again, we're in control of that. We get an opportunity to look at patterns of play. We get an opportunity to freeze frame moments within the game and create scenarios around that. So other things I would have mentioned earlier would be around one-on-one situations and tackling a ball is delivered into a full-back. They're one-on-one with the full forward. We get to freeze frame it, and we get to give the forward opportunities to understand what's around them, players potentially coming off their shoulder, where they are in the pitch in relation to where they would like to shoot, or the space they have in behind them and the opportunities that just arose. We get opportunities to do that around the middle of the pitch, where we get to freeze frame a puck out situation and the best ways to approach getting bodies around that puck out or rough ball. The big question we have around design and manipulation of games, and the question you should always ask yourself as a coach is, will they face this in a game? Making sure that I'm in control of the constraints. I don't over-constrain, because over-constrain, they don't get an opportunity to make sure that they can select the right solution to create a positive outcome. And the freeze frame moment that's going to pop up in the game pops up here in training. Now that's a learning curve for us as coaches. That's going to take time. That's going to be, okay, that didn't work tonight. And it's that use of conscious coaching, the term that was mentioned in the previous slide, thinking about what are my questions going to be? Are they related to my task? Will they face this in a game? Moving on to our use of questioning. Our use of questioning is incredibly important because it opens opportunities for dialogue and environment that supports it. So ultimately, we want players that are going to come up with solutions on the fly on the pitch based on previous experiences and based on the tasks that have been put to them in games. And if they don't have the confidence to open those lines and that opportunity for dialogue in order to get their point across to their coach or their teammate, the opportunities and chances for success are going to continually decline. So use of open questions. How could we impact the situation we've just been put in? What are the 3 key components of your opposition team's approach to how you set up there? What would you change in the next round, moving on to our next task, in order to create the outcome that you require? And all of a sudden then we have cogs of wheels turning, and we have players thinking, we have players communicating, and ultimately when we get to youth level, led by us and walking the pathway that we have laid for them, the players should be heard most. That's where you're going to see your real improvement. So square pegs in square holes as opposed to square pegs in round holes. Is what they're reacting with correct for the condition and the game? Sorry, apologies about that. No, I'll just jump back into that. So is what they're reacting with correct for the condition and the game? So it's those outcomes. Are they selecting the right situation, or are they selecting the right solution for the right situation? Moving back to over constrain. If we were to over constrain, let's say, the use of a strike or a hand pass in a game, forcing them into situations where they end up strike passing 5, 6, 7 meters, instead of what we'd actually like them to do in a game, which is use the hand pass over that and get the ball moving quick, are we allowing them the opportunity to put square pegs in square holes with the task that we're laying out and the questions that we're asking? And the bottom point then is, if they fail, they fail. It's an opportunity to coach, it's an opportunity to learn. And not being flippant, but on the opposite side, if they succeed, they succeed. It's not going to define them as a human being or an individual, that level of success or that level of failure. We're in control of the pathway, and it's about making sure that the lows aren't too low and the highs aren't so high that they don't come down for them. That's where we get coached with players, and that's where we see our improvement and real learning, and the values and the principles that we outlaid earlier on as regards ownership, accountability, responsibility, and creating better human beings in order to create better people and better players in that order. So I hope that's covered the games-based approach. Our next facet, and I'm very, very conscious of time and not taking up too much of your time, so we're going to fly through these. Our strength conditioning, a lifestyle that adds to the person. So everything we do off pitch should be to complement what we do on the pitch. And another key point that our strength conditioning coach would say is that if you as a player are getting more excited about your time in the gym than you are about your time in the pitch, me as a strength conditioning coach, I'm not doing my job right. I really am it. The real key component should always be the pitch, and everything else then complements that. The only advice I would have around an approach to strength conditioning in relation to the youth athlete would be please seek assistance. It is the absolute key. Seek professional help, someone that has experience in dealing with youth athletes, because we have to cover so many different things in relation to hormones, growth spurts, limb length, so many different things. And then we have to coach a movement pattern within those things in order to lay a base for injury prevention, which is the key to strength conditioning. Strength conditioning is coined to keep us on the pitch so that it allows us a window for development long term, as opposed to constantly going between the pitch and the physio room, pitch and the physio room, pitch and the physio room. The player is going to see one work or a bank of work behind them in relation to the game they're going to play. That's where they're going to see their real improvements. And strength conditioning is the key component to complementing that. At this age, it's important to look at education over outcomes. Educating the person on how they move, educating the person around body awareness and body mastery. And yes, there are opportunities here for windows of optimum development, but they're not your only chance. We talk about, let's say, at 14, 15, 16, laying the base for speed development slash base levels of conditioning. But what this doesn't allow for, and these windows of optimum development, this doesn't allow for the individual. And we will have opportunities based on that person's approach and the player we have in front of us to create a real understanding and real improvement across all bases of physical performance once the player makes the decision based around the environment that we've created for them that they're going to improve. It's the reason people all of a sudden decide that they're going to make a change to their lifestyle, they're going to get a real buy-in, and they're going to lose weight, tone up, and change their body. And you see these incredible performances, and you see these incredible changes in people's body shape, you see these incredible changes in people's lifestyle, and it all comes down to the decision that the individual has made. And no matter what we do, the one thing I would say is we never count out the individual. Our most important things here are prevention of injury and education over outcomes. And this comes from body mastery, looking at body weight movements and how we control ourselves before we load in any capacity. Movement mastery before strength, so we master the movement before we look at strength. Mobility before strength, being mobile, being strong through end range and comfortable in end range in things like squats, bench presses, lunges, and then stability also before strength. So before we strengthen, and to a certain extent, it's a construct and it's a model for a return to injury or return to play post-injury protocol would be we mobilize the joint. Let's say if I was to do damage to an ankle ligament, the first thing that would go due to swelling would be mobility. So I'd need to get that mobility back and get comfortable moving into the range that I was in before once the swelling goes down. Then from there, I'd look to stabilize it, make it strong underneath me, make sure I'm comfortable in balanced situations, and then from there we look to strengthen. So I would always prioritize the same approach in talking about a youth development and developing a youth athlete. We mobilize, we stabilize, and then we look to strengthen once there's an education and once there's an understanding around our approach. So this is a question that came in, and I was actually going to approach it anyway because it's key, and we see a lot of dropout at the start and approach into adolescence and becoming a youth athlete, and also at the tail end that transfer into adult level sport. So preventing dropout is a multifactorial issue, and sometimes it's beyond our control. So other loves come in. We don't have control over their lives. We don't have control over the decisions they want to make in relation to work, in relation to socializing, life, love, family, kids. All these things are further down the line for them, and all those things are beyond our control. The player is also in control of their own participation. So at any point in time, a player can decide that I'm going to just give this a little bit of rest for a little while, I'm going to go and try something different. They can also say that I've tried something different, I'm going to go back to the GAA because that was the last time that I was really felt accepted and that I really enjoyed what I did. So if we build it, they will come. And that environment will complement their life and mean something to them, in the sense that we prioritize the person over everything else. We look at long-term development, and we also look at putting the person at the center of everything we do, where they feel wanted, accepted, they feel like they have a place where they can positively pump their time and energy into, where they feel that even if success isn't always at the crux, the relationships they're building are things they can carry forward all the way through their life. And this is a key point for me in relation to entry points and re-entry points. And it's a point that I want to put across to any coaches here. Have we allowed for this? Have we allowed for a player joining us at 14 years of age, may not have played the game before? And do we look at it as an opportunity for us to learn as coaches, and for us to give a person an opportunity to, again, have something that is a means of expression for them? Or do we look at it as in, this player is never going to really make the step up? So for me, in my own personal playing capacity, I joined the GAA club late. And I was very lucky that from the very start I was accepted, because I came from playing soccer at a reasonably high level, and I had a certain base, a skill set, or athletic kind of base already laid, and it was transferable to the sports I was playing, because again, multi-sport development, the wider the base of understanding of movement and the wider the skill set, the better chance we have and the opportunity we have for improvement and mastery and positive outcomes. So the point I want to make is, if there wasn't those entry points and those re-entry points for me, I may not be playing at the level I'm playing at now, or I may not have GAA as not only just my love and my job and my work, but also my means of expression, and it's my 9 to 5 and then it's my 5 to 9 every single day. And personally, I feel if those entry points were there for me, I wouldn't have the quality of life I don't think that I have now, and the level of enjoyment and fulfillment and self-satisfaction and the relationships that I've built up with people over the last 10 to 12 years in a playing and professional capacity. So the GAA was a gift to me, but it was only a gift to me because it was made possible by these entry points and these re-entry points. So you will have players that will leave you and come back. You will have players that will not have been there with you from the start, but will see what you are doing in relation to how you are making people feel and what you are building, and the level of sense of identity that you have created with your GAA club and your group, and they will want to come and they will want to join. And have you allowed for this? So multi-sport development is a huge key, and it's important for us, if we have players that are multi-sport players, to show interest in the other side of their life, because the other sport that they may be playing, whether it's you're an out-and-out hurling coach and they're playing football, or you're an out-and-out football coach and they're playing handball or soccer or rugby, there are facets within those sports that are going to complement what we're doing here, and everywhere they go, they learn. And the more skills they have, the better chance they have of success. The last key point I want to talk about in preventing dropout are transition periods in life. How can we best provide support around the opportunities and see these things as opportunities for us to support players and young people in order to have the confidence to be able to make the step into the next grade? So we see it stepping out of primary school into post-primary school, that players tend to drop off, whether that's to a lack of capability of dealing with the situation, or a lack of confidence around their own ability and not wanting to put themselves out there, let's say, in a completely different group, that are coming from different areas and different sections, all being funneled into the one area. How can we possibly as coaches give them the best opportunity to be confident enough in their own ability and their own ability to improve? So even if their ability isn't at the level it needs to be at that time, are they confident in their ability to improve, given that they apply themselves and they put the work in order to allow them and afford them the opportunity that they have to create friendships and social outlets that are going to stand to them for life. And again, the confidence they take in these situations are going to allow them a certain scope for comfortability in social situations. Then that's mirrored at the opposite end of the spectrum when they leave from leaving cert and they go on and make their choices around college. So if we're to say that prioritizing long-term participation in sport is at the crux of things for me as a coach, I need to give them the tools to be able to say that when they go off to college, yes, education is their priority, and it 100% is their priority, but they have this tool with them, they have this tool in their toolkit, and a part of it that they don't want to leave behind because it enriches their life. And it's important as well for us as coaches to understand that when they go to these setups, when they step into post-primary school and they're playing from players from different areas, they learn from them. And that's magnified at college level because you have players coming to certain areas from all over the country, and they could be top level players. And the opportunity to play with them and learn from them could be the difference between them making a step up in any given level along the pathway. So how can we possibly manage this and support this and give our players the confidence to say that you're coming from a good base here, even if it was a case that we weren't starting on this team? You need to understand that it's going to be a step up, but it's an opportunity for you to learn and grow, and no matter what happens, if you go at it with the right attitude, you're going to come out of it a better player and a better person, and you're going to meet people that are like-minded to you, and relationships will be built that you're going to carry into every aspect of your life from that point on. From there then, I'm very conscious that I've been on, I'd say, just over the hour now, or just approaching the hour, and I know we have questions. So conscious application is the great leveler in skill development. So if we have players that are falling behind, or if we have players that are not at the level of other players in a certain age group, conscious application is going to be the level there on the part of the player. So can we encourage opportunities around educating them around how their body should look and feel in performance of a skill, so that they're conscious of it and they can apply the learning outcome in order to develop the skill. Immaculate technique is the great leveler in a size differential, and a size differential is a huge aspect around development within youth players. So if we have a size differential, do we look at it as a weakness, or do we look at it as an opportunity to go and coach based on the example given previous around creating a task that takes that huge size differential and shifting the focus towards a coaching point that really focuses in on that immaculate technique? And will what you prioritize as a coach serve you now or them long term? And that's a question I'm just going to leave sit, because we have a huge responsibility to our communities, to our club, to the parents that are bringing the kids to the pitch, to ourselves, and most importantly to the players and the young people we have in front of us, to create that time to treat them as a human being, one-to-one, and put them at the center of what we do. And winning will always come at a cost. No matter what you do, winning will always come at a cost. And that can be a hugely positive cost. That can be blood and sweat and tears, and that can be time pumped into a shared interest in a group that creates a deep, deep bond, or it can be losing a player because we focused on the win at 13, 14, 15, a player that had the potential to be a huge, huge crux in not just our team, but our club and our community. And the final point I want to leave you with then is that an environment that facilitates ownership, accountability, leadership, self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-improvement will serve the person, the athlete, the player, the parent, the coach, the club, the community, and the world. If we make better people, we'll make better players. So thank you so much for listening. I'm very conscious of the time. I know we have some questions coming up, or we may potentially have some questions. I hope you took something from this. I hope that we looked at something on a deeper level, but you also took some coaching outcomes from it. And thank you very much for listening to me. And I'd like to thank Owen and Barry for the opportunity to present this evening.
Thanks very much, Peter. That was excellent. I wouldn't worry about going on too much. Sometimes we cut things short rather than going on with things, so I think that's okay. Really excellent presentation. A couple of things that stood out for me, Peter, is the fact that everybody has the shared ownership of the journey of this, developing this player through the teenage years. Not just the player, but the coach, the parent, and how everybody is important, and the critical role everybody plays in shaping that environment where the player can learn and can develop and can have a growth and an improvement on the field and off the field in the person development as well. And even I think that point you made right at the very end about is what we do now. Are we looking to get a win now for us as a coach, or are we looking to get the player to develop long term? I think that's a very important point. I just scribbled that down as you were going right at the end, but I think it's definitely something that's worthwhile looking at. Just a couple of questions. We have one or two from tonight, but we also have a couple from earlier on, from people who put them in when we were registering. So we had over 140 people that registered, which is fantastic, and people from across the country and from across all parts of GAA, Camogie Ladies Football. So it's great to have so many people interested in the workshops. A couple of questions. Given, say, maybe a player, maybe an under 14, so a 13, 14, maybe even 15-year-old, who might be a dual player, either dual to both GAA codes or maybe dual to one code and another sport. How many nights a week, Peter, would you think is suitable that we should be looking as the coach of the GAA team to have that player with us down the field and in our field, taking into account all the things that you looked at earlier on and the external pressures that might be on the player? So how many nights a week do you think is suitable for that 14-year-old on the team?
It's a great question. For me, there are a couple of ways to approach this. My own ideal, to be honest with you, and it's a bit of an off-the-wall concept to a certain extent, based on where we're coming from and what we're doing. But that multi-sport athlete, how many sports that they're playing, who are they engaged with, and are we as coaches engaging with the people that are the decision makers in those other sports? So is it possible for everybody to come together and come up with a training plan that's going to allow them opportunities to say that, let's say we're hurling, we're training on Tuesday night, they're going to train soccer Thursday night, they're going to train football on Friday night, we have a match this weekend, so we're going to lay off this session? Or are we all battling for a kind of space in the calendar? Going beyond that then, or delving deeper into it, to be honest with you, for the youth athletes across the board, I would say 2 nights on the pitch would be enough, because we want to find a balance also between encouraging them to grow and explore themselves. So if we have a culture around practice, play, growth, and we have our sessions really well planned out, meticulously planned out, and we have our outcomes looking long term, there isn't as much pressure on us to get them out that many nights a week. And then all of a sudden we're producing players and people that understand a balance, and a balance between their home life, their study life, their work life, and their sport. And ultimately the sport itself is supposed to complement our life. It's supposed to be a facet, and again, like I said, a means of expression that's going to give us a sense of fulfillment that we may not get in other areas, or an outlet for our competitive nature or self-development or improvement kind of mindset or approach that we may not get other places. So if we overload, it becomes a chore. I would say 2 nights a week max if we're battling for a player, but it's more important to take a step back and manage that individual than it is to get out as many nights a week as we possibly can. Hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good input into that. We've 2 more at the moment, and we might get 1 or 2 more in. So I'll start with the first one. Is one that you mentioned, the Mackey Cup, and you mentioned that we've heard talked about it, even with obviously Limerick are going so well at the moment, and it's been talked about at seen a few articles and people talking about it as a very good starting point for players to kind of make that step from that Go Games piece up to the Borden and Over, the youth age group. Can you just maybe give people a little bit of an insight into what the Mackey Cup is and kind of how it's run, or maybe what the level of prep in it? I know you won't give us all the secrets, but you might give us 1 or 2 of the ones from about the Mackey Cup and what's involved in it, please.
Yeah, so Mackey Cup will be our primary school competitions in Limerick, and basically what that is then is from all the primary schools in Limerick, they get an opportunity to send 3 to 4 players into a trial process to be selected for that area. So we have a city team, a west team, an east team, and a Mackey team, and all the primary schools in Limerick City get a chance to send a number of players in for a trial process, and that ultimately leads to an interdivisional competition later in the year. That happens for football, that happens for hurling, that happens for ladies football, and that happens for camogie. And basically what it is it's a player's first exposure to coming together with players from other areas, and us as GDAs, it gives us an opportunity then to see them before they step into the process of, let's say, development squads like that. So it's an opportunity I never had. I would have, to be honest with you, looking back in it, I would have loved to have been part of it. But what happens, like I said, is they get put forward by their primary schools. They come to us for a trial process. Let's say we pick a panel, and it's an interdivisional tournament, primary school based. That just really just kind of kickstarts the whole thing for us.
Very good. Sorry, I muted myself there. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks for that, Peter. And I think that might give people more of an insight into this. The next one then is another one that we got prior to tonight, and when people were registering. So I suppose it's maybe one that looks at, the general trends in the game. And someone has asked here, do you think that coaches at a youth age are now setting themselves up too defensively, or are they going more defensively at that kind of 14-15 age group? And is it something that people are trying to do to reflect what's happening in, I suppose, predominantly in the senior inter-county game with sweepers or extra players back in both hurling and in football? Do you think it's something coaches are doing, and maybe is it something that you think should be encouraged to mirror what's happening in the adult game, or maybe do you feel that it should be left to the kind of the more natural game at the younger age group?
I feel that no matter what happens, at any level, country, up and down the country, that it always mimics the successful side of the inter-county game. So all of a sudden, trends develop based on the approach of a successful inter-county team, and that becomes the kind of identity of the game in certain areas, or maybe in all areas across the country. My own personal feel about it is that if we were to talk about 2 sides of a mountain, and we were to talk about the start of the mountain on the left hand side being the young player entering the game for the time being, or entering the game at the very, very start, and the opposite side being our top level inter-county player or our top level club player, there's a middle point that's going to be the top of the mountain, and that's going to be our stage development for our youth player. What I would say is, my own personal stance on it should be, if we take a step back and look at everything subjectively, in relation to development, we shouldn't be looking at trends. We shouldn't be looking at at systems and sets of play that somebody has coined in order to make the group of players that they have in front of them at that given time in a window of history that as our priority as a coach. We need to take a step back at youth level and look at it and say, no matter what happens, every single system, every single tactic, every single facet of every single game is underpinned by some basic principles of the game. The ability to attack one-on-one, the ability to defend one-on-one, our basic skill level, our understanding of concepts of the game around defending and attacking, and those principles. And I feel that creating the greater understanding around those principles needs to be the priority at youth level. So if you feel that there's a current tactic out there that is going to complement a learning outcome that you've already decided on as a coach, I would say implement it, try it, use it as a learning curve, use it as an opportunity to take something forward. To really answer the question just flat out, do I feel that some coaches are setting up too defensively in order to mimic what's going on in the inter-county game? To a certain extent, I do. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and I suppose as you are right, it is people mimic it. It's people see what's happened on the television or the matches they go to, so it is I suppose coming up. One more here, and it kind of relates to one of the points you made, and the ones I picked you up on, and the are we coaching for the coach now or for the player long term? And maybe how might you as a coach, if you are taking that long term developmental approach, which it seems is the one where we want to get the player through the teenage years and out into the other side to the adult end, how do you how might you deal with maybe other coaches in the club, or maybe parents, or maybe people within the club who don't see it that way, don't see we have a great under 14 or 15 team, we want to win the FAIL, or we want to win the under 15 championship, and don't see the point of we need to develop these players on the way to the adults, and how would you get them to turn around to, rather than prioritizing it for the coach's benefit now to the player's long-term benefit? Any thoughts on how that might be done?
The key thing for me in absolutely everything you do in relation to working with human beings, because ultimately the person as well that may have a different viewpoint to you is a human being at the center and the crux of everything, and they believe that is the best approach based on their experience. We have as many opportunities or as many examples of players coming to the game late and being successful as we do examples of players being successful early in the game and dropping off. And there's a stark contrast between the two. So there are always going to be examples out there to back up your point. There are always going to be examples out there to back up the person in opposition and their point also. But what I would say is, what we can't really hide from, or nobody could hide from, would be having a kind of a tangible, measurable understanding around what your players want and what their parents want for them. So there are opportunities there to engage and communicate through the use of face-to-face, through the use of an anonymous questionnaire gone out to your group, with open questions along the lines of, how do you feel about your sport? How do you feel about your team? What would you like to get out of playing GAA? What is your favourite thing about coming to the pitch? What is your one great success on a personal level from the last 12 months within your group? What is the thing you are proudest about your team or your group? And asking those open questions, getting that feedback, if we're looking to change minds and if we're looking to move into towards prioritizing developing the human being at the center of everything, I don't think that could be ignored to a certain extent. So getting that understanding of exactly what the player wants and seeing and giving opportunities of that being successful in other places and marrying up the two. And plus as well, on top of that, if that's what you want, if you want to make these changes, you got to grab it by the scruff of the neck and you got to lead it yourself as well and gather that information, be the advocate for it. And for me, I feel that there would be opportunities to potentially change minds or opportunities for us to earn and to go and to be successful in where we feel the game needs to go. I hope that answered it now.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and I think that's it's a nice way to go to look to finish up. And like, I think you've given us a lot of food for thought there, Peter, in both answering the questions here in the last 10 or 15 minutes, but also in your presentation, both in the slides and in your own thoughtful insights into it. So just on our behalf in Déise OG, we'd like to thank you for the time you're putting into tonight's session. And these things don't just rock up on the Monday evening. So I know you put a good bit of work and we were in touch with you a good bit in the last 2 weeks. So thanks very much for that. I'd like to thank everybody again who came on again tonight. Again, like the previous sessions, these one has been recorded. So the link to this will be sent out to people. So again, if people want to have a look back at either some of the questions or some of the slides or that Peter had, that will be sent out to people during the week. And just to let you know, our next webinar then is 2 weeks again from tonight, and we'll be joined by Mikey Bevins, who's going to be looking at the adult coaches and preparing for the club season. So another good one to have in the next one, our 4th webinar in our series. So just thanks to Peter, thanks to our own GDAs, John, David and Barry, for the work they're doing promoting these and the work they're doing around all this coach education process at the moment. And stay safe, everybody, and please God, we'll talk to everybody soon. Stan.
Thank you for having me.